Hi and welcome back to a boat called Wanda. Well, let's get straight back on deck and straight back to it. Oh, hang on, I just remembered. I don't think there's anything to be done on the deck. All the primer's laid down, all the primer's been sanded back. There's absolutely nothing more to be done on the deck except paint it. What a relief. As I promised last update, this week I'll look at taking the fuel tank out of the bilge and basically getting back to what I enjoy doing most and what I do best, which is ripping stuff out. And for that I'll need to grab my favourite bucket, which contains the tools of destruction. Now before I get in there and start creating havoc, I'll probably just do a quick overview of what I need to do first before I can get access to the tank to start cutting it out. So let's take a look at that. Right, fuel tank removal. Let's take a look at what needs to be done here. Back into the well of despair. I think first step is I will bring out that prop shaft. That's sort of the coupling's been taken off from the engine so the engine could get lifted, but it's just left hanging. So take that out, and just so I can get down here I'll start ripping out all the old hoses and wiring so I've got a bit more clarity and room to move down there. Now with the propeller I found that all I needed to do really was take all of the hex bolts out of the rear of the propeller. There's a bit of a hub and that seems to hold everything together. So once that came out, the entire prop assembly just sort of fell apart. And then there was just one pin that I had to knock out which held the bolt in place. And once I've undone the bolt, then that just leaves this last one piece assembly which is on the shaft. So I've borrowed a prop puller and this has been set up for a day, and I just keep on gently increasing the tension all the time. So one trick is to get two hammers and either side try and strike this at the same time to try and send a shock. Not that sort of shock. Well, that has actually moved it about 5mm down. Just try another tap. Ta-da! Okay, so this should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. Yay! There is a propeller shaft. That very unsavoury rusted on hulk of metal which is the engine coupling. Okay, I think the next step will be just to clean up some of this redundant cabling and hose pipes so that I can get a bit more access to the front here, because I know that I'm going to have to cut through some of the carpentry. So it'll just be easy to see what's what when I get rid of some of this crap. So here's the pipes coming out. Next up on the list, I think I will deal with this 240 volt stuff. Yeah, I love this part. I'm not going to reuse any of this. I'm going to do it from scratch, just the way I like it. I think I might have said before, maybe I've not, but the electrics is my favourite part of a boat. Electronics and electrical systems. I've just always been interested in that side of life. Okay, a bit more of that. What else we got? Oh, oh gosh, I better not cut this. This is my 240 volt cable going to the dehumidifier, so can you imagine if I just cut that? Could have been the end of a boat called Wanda. YouTube channel finished. Oh gosh, this shit. Okay, so it looks like I've still got a couple of fittings on here. Seems to be one here which goes back. I think that's the inspection pump. This is basically a way that you can pump out a bit of the bottom of the tank and take a look at it in case it's got diesel bug. There's another one here. That's been cut off. That might have been for the diesel heater. Perhaps that was a pump. Well, as you can see, the tank is underneath my feet. So the first thing that I'd need to do is to cut away this, which is sort of helping to keep the tank down. And then there's the first bit of furniture here that I need to deal with. There's the front there with the inspection port that also has all the pickups going through it. So this is screwed on. I should be able to unscrew that, unscrew this, cut that, and then hopefully it'll come up and then out a little bit and then out, but it remains to be seen. But anyway, I've got all the old cabling and hoses and all the other crap out the way, so at least I can see what I'm doing now. Oh, fantastic. That's a relief. Well, that's quite helpful because, as you can see, I've now got access to this whole space. There's a lot of old pipes and things there that need to be cut away and removed, and there's that oil residue that also needs to be mopped up. So yeah, I've got a lot more working space with that piece taken out. So yeah, I'm really pleased it came out easily. Right, it's time for the fun activities to begin, and I get to choose my favourite weapon from my tools of destruction, where I've got all these little bits and pieces lined up, ready to get to work. Let's start with this little beauty. Okay, so now it's just a matter of cutting along this channel here where the laminate's been wrapped around the top of this tank. Right, well, as you can see here, I've cut that laminate off the top of the fuel tank that was basically holding it down in place. I'm not sure what else is holding it down, whether there's further laminate deep down or foam or anything. I did try to get through to Halberg Rassi and ask them once, and I explained, you know, the fuel tank's in the bilge, I need to cut out through the laminate to cut the fuel tank out. You know, is there anything else holding it in place? Is there foam or whatever? And they replied to me and said, oh, I don't know, you can't access the fuel tank, it's all laminated in. So I went back a second time. Yes, I know it's all laminated in. I'm going to cut through the laminate to get the tank out. Is there anything holding it in? And then they said, well, there was nobody there in the factory anymore that worked on 352s, and so they just don't know. So it remains to be seen. Okay, so I just need to get back in there and get some acetone and try and wipe off as much of that gunk as possible, and then look at seeing how it's going to lift out. And I've got a pretty bad feeling that the bilge is going to be pretty grisly once the tank comes out. I'm expecting to see a lot more of that black muck. Well, anyway, let's have a go. Okay, well, exciting times. The moment of truth has arrived and I'm ready to give this a go. I've got a strong beam going across the top of the cockpit coaming. I've got two blocks, one down the bottom, one up the top, so there's about a 4-to-1 purchase here. I've got two places in the tank where these ropes are anchored into. I drilled 2 holes here to get the rope through, and then I've just got one rope through there with a piece of wood under the inspection hatch. So now it's just a matter of giving it a go and trying, and fingers crossed. So far there's only been one place that I've had to cut, and I've had to cut just the bottom of this panel here, from here to here. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get this up and in front of this, or whether it's going to hit down the bottom there. So right, well, let's give it a go, hey? Hopefully nothing breaks. Oh, there's movement. There is movement, look at that. We have liftoff. And it's cleared that. Brilliant. Brilliant. Up she comes. Pesky boy. Oh my god, I think this is going to make it. Oh, now it's just going to get over that lip. Oh yes, yes. Now what I need is a second pair of hands. I can loosen off this one and let it drop down. Yeah, that's the way. tip back, lovely, and you come up, and then if I can make this go forwards, oh, I need another pair of hands. I need a second pair of hands. Well, completely as expected, I've hit a bit of a brick wall with getting the tank out, and now I need to do what I did want to do, which is start ripping up more cabinetry and furniture, because the tank's not going to come out as it is. Basically, it's restricted by this cutout here, which means it can't get up any higher. Because it can't get up any higher, I can't rotate it round, because I think I should be able to swing it round and up, backward, end on, out through the cockpit hole. So I need to cut this away. That's the first step, and then the second step is to cut this worktop away, because this needs to be cut away back here to allow the full opening of the cockpit hatch to, you know, allow the tank to come up. Well, I've ended up going down a rabbit hole, which is not what I wanted to do, but I had to cut the kitchen worktop, or the galley worktop here, in order to make access to get the bloody tank out. So I guess I'll be doing what my good friend Gabriel from C2C has just done, and install one of those nice marble type, or whatever material it is, worktops, because, you know, this is knackered now. I've had to cut it off here. But the good thing is now, as you can see, there's clear access. Well, there should be clear enough access to lift this out. Well, unfortunately, the memory card filled up about here and the camera shut down, so I didn't quite capture the money shot. That is the moment when the tank came up and out of the engine bay hatch and was safely secured on deck. But anyway, that's probably fine, because it wasn't quite as elegant as I planned, and in the end we really had to sort of manhandle it to get it out of the last sort of foot and then onto the deck. Basically, I didn't have the beam with the block and tackle set up high enough, so there wasn't enough clearance. So I'll know that when I put it back, that I need to set up the beam much higher, so that there's plenty of room for the tank to swing around and then go down that hatch. But anyway, here it is in all of its glory. I've cleaned it up as best as I can and got most of the gunk off it, so let's take a closer look. So I've flipped the tank over, so this is now the underneath side that would have been at the bottom of the keel, and there's the culprit there. So that's the hole that basically let all the diesel drain out of the tank. And to be honest, it's not what I expected. I had thought that there'd be a gash here, thinking that, well, I knew that Wanda had hit a reef and maybe that had ruptured the tank. So it is a little bit disappointing to find out that it's actually probably galvanic corrosion, or corrosion of this weld, because it means that the tank has probably had it. There's all sorts of pitting and corrosion in other places, so the tank could be quite thin in places where the pitting has occurred. Well, I'm really confused about what to do about this tank. What I'd really like to be able to do is just patch it up, so weld what needs to be done, fix up the holes, fill up the pitting and put it back in, but I'm just not sure how long it's going to last, whether it's going to last another, you know, 10, 20 years, or because I've already seen that, you know, there's corrosion there, that it's going to keep getting worse, versus having to, you know, shell out £1,400 for a new tank. If anyone out there watching is an expert in stainless steel tanks and thinks, you know, I can just weld up that seam, then let me know. But if you think it's actually a lot more serious than that, also let me know. Now, I'd just like to show you the repair that they did out in the Caribbean for this, because I think it's actually quite clever. It's quite pragmatic. They didn't have to cut the tank out or touch it. What they did was unscrew this inspection port, which they could get access to, which also contains all the pickup lines. Then they fabricated this steel tube, and I'll show you in a sec, but they put a couple of extra baffles down there to support the steel tube. Tube sits down there. Pickup lines go back where they belong and are screwed back down. All these holes line up. So now what you've got is a situation where you've isolated the tank from the pickup lines, and because there's a secondary tank under the settee, that basically fed into this tube here, which allowed the pickup lines to take fuel into the engine, you know, and the rest of the tank was just bypassed completely. The other concern I have is how on earth I can get All that black gunk that I could see through the bilge is also in here because it's just obviously been sloshing through now that there was a hole in this. And so I just don't know how I'm going to get past all the baffles and everything to get it out, because it's you know, I put my hand down there and just scraped it out. It's not just dirty diesel, it's, you know, that really thick residue that's going to clog up everything really quickly. And you can see there that they'd actually welded in a couple of extra supports to that tube to sit into. Well, this is a little bit like being on the dark side of the moon. This part of Wanda is a part that I've never been able to get to up to this point, because there's always been the engine here, and then the heating system here, or the hot water system here, and the big sort of waterlock muffler here. So this part of the boat, which is, you know, quite a important part, is now newly discovered by me. So I'm just in here. I've ripped out all the old insulation, and I'm just using the scraper tool to get the last bits off, and then I can give it a clean out and start to sort of get some kerosene onto the bottom part to get rid of that oil residue, which still exists in this part as it does the bilge. Okay, well, I call it a week and end at this point. The last couple of days since I took the fuel tank out, I've spent a lot of time cleaning up the bilge, the engine room and the cockpit locker. And in fact, I enjoyed taking the cabling out of the engine room so much that I made an executive decision that I would take every piece of cabling that I could see away and start again from a complete blank sheet of paper. So yeah, that's what I've done. So I'll go out with a bit of a montage of some before and after photos, and the astute viewers might be thinking, yeah, well, that's all great, cutting the cables away, but what about the other side where they come out of the electrical switch box? Yeah, that's a really good question. And for now, everything's ended up in the box of shame. But anyway, I'll show you a little bit more about that in the future update, because I will have to come back and deal with that mess. But for now, I'll see you next time. Cheers.